Hi, I'm Julie Giese. I'm the president of the Chicago Street Race, and this is Her Table.
Now you see her.
You are magnificent!
Welcome to Her Table, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the badass women who are redefining the game. Join hosts Kate Foley and Megan Martinez as they unlock the secrets of success from the brightest female pioneers in the industry.
Welcome back to another episode of Her Table. We have an amazing guest today, my friend and president of the Chicago Street Race, Julie Giese.
Julie brings a long history of driving results and managing high-profile initiatives at NASCAR venues. If you have any questions about cars or racing, Julie, she's the girl to talk to.
Julie has been recognized by her peers for having strong leadership skills and her innovative ideas, whether it's with marketing or construction, as she rebuilt the Phoenix Raceway here in Phoenix, Arizona. I can't wait to learn more about what Julie's done, trading in her hard hat for now taking the street race to Chicago. So much to get into, so much to learn. Pull up a chair. It's Her Table. Welcome, Julie Giese. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited. Look at that view, Megan.
I know. It's so nice. I'm literally so jealous. Wish I was there.
You're in Chicago on a 60 degrees at 60, 65 yet there?
Yeah, it feels like spring, so I'll take it. The sun is out. So yeah, hello from Chicago.
Now, you're from central Wisconsin, grew up on a dairy farm.
I did.
And you are one of the top most powerful women in NASCAR.
I don't know about that, but
you are on that, Julie. You are. Can you talk to us a little bit about your journey into racing? So kind of how you made that transition from the farm life growing up in central Wisconsin to now you're running Chicago Raceway?
Yeah, so it's funny because, again, growing up on a dairy farm, I went to college for agriculture because that's what I thought I was going to do. It's all I really knew, and did an internship. I think it was my sophomore year, and realized very quickly this is not what I want to do the rest of my life. So I'm a big advocate of internships because you learn a lot about yourself and what you don't enjoy. So that's when I changed my major. I still kept agriculture, but really started to look at marketing and what that opportunity looked like. And as I was getting ready to graduate, I loved racing. I grew up a race fan. My dad's a big race fan. So I sent my resume out to all the racetracks across the country. Like, how hard could it be? That's when they sent a lot of rejection letters. So I have rejection letters from most of those racetracks. And
you still have those?
I do.
Do you have like is it like a black box? Is it like a red file? Like, there's got to be something special about where you keep it.
So I wish I could say. So it's funny because I didn't even realize at the time I had saved them until I moved when I was moving from Watkins Glen International to Daytona Beach, Florida. I found this folder called job letters, and I'm like, what in the world is this? And so I opened it up, and it was the first one on the folder when I opened it was signed by the person that I was just about to start working for in Daytona. And he was at Phoenix at the time. So it was like, again, you can't script those things. It was crazy, the coincidence of it. So I have those letters signed by most of my peers. I remind them of that frequently. So yeah, I started working at an agency and in Minneapolis, and just continued to try to network, knowing racing was what I wanted to do. And a colleague at the agency knew someone who worked at Watkins Glen International in upstate New York. He, out of the blue, called her about an open position. And she knew I had that passion, and she made the connection for me. So I interviewed in December of 2000 in upstate New York, and moved there January of 2001. And it was an entry-level PR coordinator position, working at that racetrack. And, here I am 23 years later, still in the sport and back in the Midwest.
That's so crazy. I love that you said, like, you have to find what you don't like sometimes to find what you do like, because I think that's something we've heard a lot. Sometimes your path, I think a lot of young women think the path has to be super defined. You have to know what you want to do. And majority of success or purpose-filled work comes from finding what you don't like to do, right? And then you're like, okay, this isn't for me. I don't want to be behind a microscope. I'm not going to be on a farm every day of my life. But it's such a unique pivot for you to go into racing, it's a fast-paced, high energy, high velocity career. So when you started kind of at the entry-level position.
Mm-hmm.
What skills did you take into that job that you had learned from your previous work that then allowed you to kind of grow through that program?
I think for me, and I've said this, like looking back, growing up on a dairy farm at the time, I did not love it at all. And it was a lot of hard work. Like we've never been on family vacations, right? I mean, the cows don't take days off. So for us, like it was just about hard work. And I have two amazing parents that are great role models on, if you're sick, you don't call in sick. You've got to still do the chores. And so they taught me the value of hard work and that hard work can pay off. And I think that's really what has like led me through my career journey. I'm not afraid of the hard work. I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and just do whatever we need to do to get the job done. And I think Watkins Glen was a really great first entry position for me, because the Glen back then, especially, very small team, and we hosted so many different events, and you got to learn how to do everything. Even though I was a PR manager, it was like we all had to learn different things on the operations side, or race morning, we're all hanging signage around the track because that's just everybody did whatever needed to get done, and it was just a really good training ground for me and taught me a lot about myself. And you talk about the path. I think that's one thing that, I think everybody they know what they want, maybe in that, like what the destination is, but to get there, it is never a straight road. It is lots of curves and twists, and you just kind of roll with it. And that's what helps get you there in the long run.
I think it builds so much too, right? Like it builds that grit and that like I might not be prepared, or this might be outside of what I was trained in, but I have confidence in myself and I have the basic skills, right? People skills, communication skills, I have problem solving skills. I think women are uniquely, finitely created with a lot more problem solving skills than men, I think sometimes, which allows us to kind of be that level head in a room, right? When everything's kind of going crazy, which is just, it's wild. So you never go to family vacation? Do you just choose now, Julie? Or are you like, I didn't get this growing up, so now I'm just on straight vacation? Or you're just not into it?
No, like I'm not good at sitting still. And so, still to this day, I've not gone on a family vacation. And which again, I'll like a long weekend, but at that point I start to go a little stir crazy too. I'm like, I need to keep myself busy. It's crazy. Wow. I know.
I feel like I'm learning so much about NASCAR and just like racing in general. We had a guest on recently, Jacqueline, who like filled me in, and we were talking to her, and she was telling us about how she was starting out one of the only women race car drivers. And so, Julie, when you were getting into the field, were you one of the very few women that was working with that company?
So with NASCAR, I think yes and no. I think for us, from a management perspective, there's always been very strong women involved with NASCAR. I think for me, I had the opportunity to work at Daytona for 14 years, and Daytona is obviously like where NASCAR started. And you hear so many amazing stories about the France family, and you hear a lot about Big Bill France, who founded NASCAR, but sometimes you don't always hear about Annie B. France, his wife, who really was making sure that it could continue and his vision could be realized. And she was just as instrumental in the development of NASCAR as Big Bill was. She was just always behind the scenes. And now with NASCAR, our vice chairwoman is Lisa France Kennedy, and she's just a tremendous role model. So I've always seen and heard about these women in the sport. So from a management perspective, but definitely when you look at like track leadership, when I was named the president at Phoenix Raceway, I was the only female track president at the time. I was the second one in NASCAR history. Gillian Zucker, who is now the president of basketball operations at the LA Clippers, she was our first female track president and a mentor of mine. And so, I've never really thought about, the only female or whatever. And that was like one of the very first questions. And for me, it was just like, well, I'm a hard worker. I'm good at what I do. Like, I want that to be the lead story, not I'm a woman in the position. But I also understand the responsibility that comes with it too, like being a role model and, continuing to be an advocate. So I think now love that I'm one of 4 female track presidents and, continue to try to lift up women and help them get involved in the sport, see the opportunities. And you see it across a lot of different parts of our sport now too, more whether it's management, but even just behind the wheel with what Haley Deegan's doing. And, we've got women that go over the wall and change tires now. We've got lead engineers. Just it's fun to see that opportunity and women taking advantage of it.
So when you left the New York space, you went to Daytona. Mm-hmm. Daytona was about to get like a revamp, like a $400 million revamp that you were then going to be in charge of. That's not just like operations. That's construction, design, management. What kind of led you to that? Like, okay, I'm going to go to Daytona and just kind of blow this up and start all over and build it better, bigger. How did you feel confident to be able to do that?
Well, it's funny because I had no idea that was going to happen. And I really fell into that role. And it wasn't something that anybody approached me or even a role that was created. Is as we were going through that renovation of the Speedway, I was the vice president of marketing. And so much of the decisions that go into how we were creating this really tied in. I mean, marketing is like the center of everything, right? And so like I was just in a lot of conversations, and I love the operations side of our business, even though my background is marketing. And so that like I was able to I was a translator essentially. So I kind of fell into this role where I was working with the design team and the construction team, and then with the track team as we were developing Daytona Rising, and just kind of fell into this role with the construction team. And it was a lot of fun. It was incredibly challenging because it was something I had never done before. But that's something that over my career, those are the things that really get me excited. And like, it's new things, blank sheets of paper. How do we be creative? How do we develop something new? And so I embraced it. Like one of my tasks with Daytona Rising was all the signage around the venue. And it's a 2.5 mile venue or track. And the grandstands themselves are 9/10 of a mile long. So you can actually run a half marathon across all of the grandstands, all the levels, believe it. Yeah. Crazy. So you think about all the signs that have to go into there. So placement to all the, like how they get affixed and like what's going on them. And I learned so much during that process. And it also like, I knew that place probably better than almost anybody because we had to do the signage for it. And it was over 10,000 signs that we had to like place and write content for. And so it was just one of those things where I just embraced it and loved the opportunity. I learned a lot about myself and that operations side, which then is what led me really to Phoenix Raceway, because we were just getting ready to renovate that facility coming on the heels of opening Daytona Rising. And so then I traded in the marketing hat for a construction hat and steel-toe boots, which was crazy. That was a shift for me to then join our construction team and really work closely with them on the construction side as we renovated Phoenix Raceway.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
That's so wild. I can't wrap my head around. It's funny. You see these, and NASCAR probably is one of the most prominent sports for marketing. Mm-hmm. I was actually just watching, and I was telling Megan, there's the special that has been done on, kind of the behind the scenes, like the hard knocks, what have you, NASCAR, and what goes into like the owner of the team, the driver of the team, right? The crew of the team, like they're all independent things, but they all feed into team ownership. How does one become a team owner? Like, how does that happen? I know some of it's probably like down the line, right? You inherit these things. But is there like
it? Yeah, but I think so. You do, like when you look at our team ownership right now, there's a lot of legacy owners that have been part of our sport for years and years. With Mr. Hendrick, with Hendrick Motorsports, Richard Childress with Richard Childress Racing, Joe Gibbs. But then you see like these newer teams. 2311 Racing is a great example. So that's a team that is owned by one of our current drivers, Denny Hamlin, as well as a man by the name of Michael Jordan, who is a huge race fan, believe it or not. And he and Denny own 2 cars, and for them, that's it's a business move, but it's a passion play as well. And over the last handful of years, you've seen a lot of new owners come into the sport. Trackhouse Racing is another great example. Trackhouse is a 2-car team, and they're owned by Justin Marks as well as Pitbull. And so again, thinking like Pitbull's involved pretty heavily with the team, and for him it was what I've heard from him is just what NASCAR is doing, and the continued outreach to new fans, and then the business model with the new cars, and there are opportunities to get into the sport. There was a new car that was rolled out a few years ago called the Next Gen car, which was really the start of some of these new teams coming in. So it's been fun to see like that shift a little bit. But you saw those legacy teams that are have been in the sport for years and years, and I think will continue to be in the sport for years and years. Coupled then with teams like 2311 who. And Trackhouse, like when you go to the tracks and into the garage area, those 2 teams definitely approach things very differently. Trackhouse sometimes they'll have somebody playing live music behind the hauler in the garage. They've got neon on their haulers. It's fun to see the different approaches.
How does that work? Because I know and Megan and I talk about this, like in the NBA, you cannot own a team and participate within the league, right? There has to be that clear separation. But this, I think, is it the first time that you've had a racer actively racing but own a different car and different team? Because I don't know, how is that not like a conflict of interest? He's trying to beat the guy in the guy's car that he pays for. How does all that work? And like how for you guys is it from a track perspective? Is it isolated, or is it like, okay, we need to make sure they're together because they're all same street, different houses kind of thing? How does that work? Because I just can't understand.
Yeah, from my perspective, like you still have, it's still very individual groups and teams that you're working with. So like with Denny's example, like he is racing for Joe Gibbs Racing, but he is the owner of 2311. And, I'm sure there's a lot that he's learning, that he's applied into what he's doing with 2311. But, when he'll be the first to say when he's on the racetrack, like he's a driver and he's there to win the race. And he's done well with a few wins already this year. And so I think from a track perspective, we work with all the race teams. They're great to work with. And so for us, it's just understanding the priorities for them, what's important, what their partners' priorities are as well, and then finding the ways to integrate them into our plans in the market. And Chicago is there's so many opportunities, and that's what's been so fun about this role is, again, it's another blank sheet of paper. We've never done this before. We haven't raced in downtown Chicago, and being able to work with the race teams and create programs that are important to their partners or to their drivers, and just whether it's a community give back, community impact initiative, or different sponsorship programs. It's been a lot of fun. So I think, that's what's great about our sport is everybody's working together to make our sport better. And you can, if you need something, being able to pick up the phone and make a phone call, and everybody is absolutely, here's either it's advice, here's how you get there, or hey, here's so-and-so that can help you out. I've had the pleasure of being in this sport for 24 years. So it's a great family network, honestly.
Wow. And you mentioned that this is the first time that you guys are going to have a race in Chicago. So how exactly, is it how do they set that up? How does that even happen? Can you kind of go into detail for that, with our listeners and everything?
Yeah. So this is what's been so much fun, and also by far the most challenging project that I've worked on. And, NASCAR, we've been around, this is our 76th season. So last year, as part of the 75 years, we, we're always looking for ways to introduce our sport to new markets. And in order to do that, like right now, we race on a lot of fixed tracks. Well, you don't have a lot of new tracks that are being built. And so you have to, if you want to go to new markets, you have to be really creative about how you do that. And several years ago, for the first time in LA, we put a racetrack in the LA Memorial Coliseum. It's called the Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum. So literally like racing on the football field. And I remember the first year we all were just like, this is amazing. And that was really what started like different conversations about, okay, we truly can do this. And during the pandemic, just taking you back to where how Chicago evolved, was during the pandemic, our drivers were able to continue competing essentially virtually on our iRacing program. And so while we weren't racing live, they were staging simulated races on their simulators that they have at home. And those were broadcast on Fox. And it was a great way to stay connected with the sport while we couldn't race in person. And it was fun to see that side of our drivers. It took you into their homes. And so as part of that, we were looking for different tracks to race on. And so that led our team to Chicago to talk to the Chicago Sports Commission. We actually came in and scanned the streets around Grant Park and created a simulation of the Chicago street race that we ran virtually in July of 2021. And our drivers actually competed on it. And coming off of that, it was like everyone kind of looked at each other and was like this could actually work. Like we need to see if this can be reality. And that was both from the NASCAR side and from the city side. And that really is what led to like where we are today, being able to race in downtown Chicago. So we essentially in just a few weeks build a course on the streets around Grant Park on DuSable Lakeshore Drive and Michigan Avenue, two very iconic places in downtown Chicago. The start finish line is centered on Buckingham Fountain. And we last July, we staged that very first street race, first for NASCAR, first for us, first for Chicago. And, it was, we were met with our challenges. We got 9 inches of rain on Sunday. And this was really meant to be a music festival as well as a racing event. And so we weren't able to get the concerts in, but we were able to get the racing in. And it was such a great story. Shane Van Gisbergen, who was in his very first NASCAR race, came over from New Zealand, won the race on his first start. And
he was really young, right? Is he really the really young driver?
I think he's maybe early 30s. He came over from the V8 supercars, and so and he had a ton of experience on the street racing, and obviously it was new for our drivers. And one of the big questions leading into the weekend was just how competitive the street race was going to be, because you're not like you're racing on streets. You're not racing on a purpose-built racetrack that leads to passing and competitive on-track action. And our drivers will tell you, like, it was competitive. I think Shane actually restarted the race like 19th and had to come through the field to win. And, I think for us, like, the location that we're racing in downtown Chicago is absolutely spectacular. The views with the lake and the skyline. And even with the rain, the broadcast was spectacular. We drove almost $110 million in economic impact, which is obviously very important to the city of Chicago. And so now we're back for round 2 here, July 6th and 7th, and excited to be able to do it all over again.
How does it work for you guys on the street race side? So when I went to NASCAR, I saw Latasha, and I went like down. I was telling Megan, like, it's slanted, like. Until you see this in real life, you really have no idea you just think they're driving in circles. It's legit. Like, I don't think anyone gets it. How do you deal with that in this regular street? Because I mean, respectfully, every city has its challenges, but Chicago has harder weather. How do you ensure that like the streets are actually viable and safe, and the surface is correct? It's a much different scenario than a track that's containable, right? No one else is on that track except for during races, as opposed to like a street race. People are driving on it until when? Like, when do you shut the street down? Because Chicago's not a small city, so I'm sure it doesn't happen weeks in advance.
No, literally, we will enclose the course just days before the event weekend. We'll start to put barriers in about a week before. And, for us, it's about making sure we're minimizing the disruptions. Like you said, we're like, where we're racing, we're cognizant. We have residents and businesses that rely on those streets to be able to move around the city. And so keeping that window tight is important to us. But you talk about, so from a street perspective, so that is one of the things that makes street racing unique. And, we worked closely with the city of Chicago, and our drivers were racing on, I think, 3 different types of pavement. There was concrete, there was some fresh asphalt, there was some older asphalt, and they'll tell you, like, you can tell, and like, as you're driving the car around that. But where we are and what we were doing, really, the streets lent itself to the race. There was some minor work that was needed leading into the weekend, but really minimal. We weren't coming in and custom building this new course. Like, again, that's part of the lore of being a street race, is that the pavement that you're racing on is part of the challenge. And so I think that was one of the things too, you just didn't know. And our drivers, they didn't get a ton of practice. I think they got maybe 50 minutes of practice on Saturday before the race. And so their only way for them to really prepare is on these simulations. And it's amazing how sophisticated these simulations can be. Like, they know, like, they can model in all of, the dynamics of the street, the type of pavement, so that when they get here and the car comes off the hauler, like, it's already kind of set up for what they think the course is going to be like. So then come practice, they can make some final tweaks, knowing that there's not a lot of time really to practice. Like, you get a short window and you're racing.
Wow.
Wild.
I know.
50 minutes. 50
I can't wait to watch. Like, I like really want to tune in and just to see it. Like, I'm assuming it'll be like on Fox.
It'll be on NBC. Yeah. So, and that's what, I'll tell you what, NBC's been such amazing partners to us on this event. And, to do a street race, like, we wanted to make sure it was really important that we were in an iconic location. And I think where we are racing in Chicago is absolutely beautiful. And around the park with, again, that skyline and the lake, like, there's really nothing better. And so NBC really leaned in and embraced that and wanted to show the beauty of this city. And that's one thing that I consistently hear from residents, that maybe they didn't attend, or maybe they were just skeptical going into the event and was like, how is this going to work? Like, why are we doing this? And then they watched it on television and they were like, man, our city looked amazing. And, it's just like, for us, we wanted to make sure that it was done to the highest levels, that it was fitting of the location that we're racing in. And I think it did. The broadcast was just spectacular. Even with the wet weather, we were able to get the track dry enough, like, for them to start the race. And then Sunday evening, like, as it, like, the sun was setting and it was coming through the skyline, I mean, it was spectacular.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting.
Okay, I want to jump back to, you left Phoenix to go to Chicago. What was the hardest part of that transition for you, from going from a standardized track, right, something that you knew you built, right, you knew the ins and outs of, to really, like, 180-degree switch to not a, I don't want to get it wrong, Julie. Is it a circle and an oval? I'm not trying to have them come for me when I say the wrong shape. Which is it? So I get it right.
It's an oval.
Oval. Okay. See, Megan, this is why I asked, because someone would be like, see,
small.
it's not a circle. I'm like, that's just round. I don't know.
I know.
You go from a fixed track to street racing.
Mm-hmm.
You hadn't done that before, but I feel like every part of your career has been, bring Julie in because we're going to do something new. We're going to rebuild something. We're going to do something new. And then we're going to do something new. And we're going to rebuild this. And then, okay, you mastered this. I feel like you have a unique, finite skill of being able to take something that's unknown and create a space that allows for execution. What was that like for you, transitioning from Phoenix to Chicago? First of all, the weather's 1,000 times different.
Does the weather count?
Yeah, the weather counts. Traffic counts. I'm sure that, being in Glendale, way out where the racetrack is outside the city. So it's very finite. It's not around a lot of things, to now you're in the middle of the city. What was that transition for you like, personally and professionally?
So personally, it was a great transition. Honestly, it was really hard to leave Phoenix. I really, if you would have asked me in 2021, 2022, like even like I'm not sure I would have ever thought I would leave Phoenix. I loved it out there. We had an amazing team at Phoenix Raceway. But for me personally, that was a big reason to make the move. So I grew up in Wisconsin. I have not lived close enough to my family to drive. I can, but it would take days. So, and just getting a little closer to family was something that was becoming more and more important to me. Now I'm a car ride away, a few hours. It's wonderful. And so I think aside from the weather, but we've been blessed with 2 very mild winters in Chicago. So I feel like it's easing me into it. I'll take it. And the summers in Chicago really can't be beat. I mean, it's like that springtime in Phoenix, like probably right now as you all are experiencing. I mean, it's like the best time of year, right? And that's what summertime is in Chicago.
Yeah.
So personally, while it was hard to leave Phoenix, like I was really excited to be close to family. And then professionally, I'd say first, like, I am surrounded by an amazing team of people that worked and continue to work on this event day in and day out. It is no small feat. Again, we are building a racetrack in a downtown area, Chicago, nonetheless, like one third biggest market in the country, and we're doing it in downtown. So, for us, it was really about making sure that we did it the right way. And I mentioned some of the France family members, like we approach it like we are representing a family. At the end of the day, NASCAR is a family-run organization, and they've taught us the importance of being good members of the community. And so that's why when we decided we were going to run in Chicago, like we need to set up an office, we need to have a team, we have to be in the market 365 days a year, and we have to be present. Like we can't come in, shut down the streets, run a race, and leave, because it's just not going to work. And so that was
mail. They're like, who should we send the complaints to? And you're like, no, I'm gone. You can't send the complaints. I'm gone.
I know. Well, that's the thing. It was like I spent the first year just having conversations and listening and being able to educate people. Because again, this was new. It's never been done before. So it's like, how is this going to happen? What does it look like? And so spent a lot of time talking just to residents and having that dialogue, understanding what their concerns were, what their questions are. And, I think that has definitely helped us, even leading into the weekend. I think, sound was a big question mark. Like, how loud is this going to be? And it was a question mark for us too. Our cars were running mufflers for the first time or the second time in competition. So we knew that there was going to be some reduction, but again, we've never run in this environment before with buildings and everything else. And the first text I got from a resident Saturday after the cars were on track, I was like curious what everyone was going to think was, is this all the louder it gets? And I was like, okay, good. Here we go. And then everyone was like, this is amazing. And just to see those cars coming through. So I mean, I said it earlier, I love blank sheets of paper. I love, being able to kind of put puzzle pieces together. You talked, Kate, earlier about women being problem solvers. I mean, that's what this role has been. It's just continuing to try to work through any and all challenges, and just do it the right way. That was really important to us, that, everyone, no matter what, we know what we're doing is different. We are disrupting normal behaviors, like by closing streets. And, for us, like making sure everyone knew that we didn't take that lightly, that we were trying to minimize all those disruptions, and just being present and having those conversations and answering emails and text messages and phone calls from residents and businesses, just to make sure if they needed anything, they knew that we were going to be responsive and be a partner.
Do you just collect people? Like I do that. Like I find a good person. I'm like, oh, you can come with me and you're going to come with me. And as you go on this journey, right, you're kind of like, okay, when you get a new task, you're like, I know someone that'll be great for it. Does that happen in NASCAR? Do you get to kind of hand pick your team of like, okay, you're going to send me here, but I'm going to take my little, my entourage and army that I know I can rely on and are good? Or are you given a team when you arrive somewhere?
So we built the team here in Chicago, and it was one thing that was important was that we had a number of Chicagoans on the team, just because, again, this was we weren't familiar with the city, and we needed that knowledge base of this city. And it's a very prideful city, and, making sure that we're representing the city the right way. And then we were, there's a few people that that were from other parts of NASCAR that joined us here. So it's a nice blend. But yeah, I mean, I collect people. I would say not always am I able to do the stars align where we can, be all in the same team at the same place, but when you need help with something, you know who to call. And that's one thing, like this race. I mean, we have a team here in Chicago, but we're small. We're less than a couple dozen people. And so it really took the entire industry coming together to bring this event to life. So tapping into those experts and to that knowledge base and the areas that we needed support in, who those individuals are. And that's what's great about NASCAR. We got so many of those amazing people that you can tap into.
Oh, that's incredible. I love hearing that too. And that's such a good question, because you think about what goes into it. I think for me, listening and seeing where you are as this president of a huge brand new racetrack, racing event, and then you were with NASCAR, what advice would you give some young women who want to get into racing and then kind of have the role that you have today?
I'd say, I think, and this was something that I had to learn, is raise your hand. Nobody's going to raise it for you.
Say it again, Julie. Raise your hand. Lean in. Step forward.
Yes, no one's going to do it for you. I mean, the first few years of my career, I was waiting for someone to just pick me. And I'm like, no. I have to put myself in that position to be selected, and to be at the table, to be in the room. And that's up to you. And I think that's hard. Sometimes, I still sometimes struggle with that. But I think you're your biggest advocate. And if you're not advocating for yourself, you can't expect others to do that for you. So I think, leading by example that way is really important to me. And I think, again, it's not always easy to do that. The other thing I'd say is, sports in general is a very tight-knit, small industry at the end of the day, and NASCAR is no different. And networking and making those connections, and finding people that have that passion, that want to be part of this sport. Someone connects with me on LinkedIn and wants to have a conversation, if they're a college student or a high school student or just somebody that's been trying to break in, I love those conversations, because that was me. That was me 20 some years ago, just wanting an opportunity to get my foot in the door and show what I can do. And so I love just being able to have those conversations, and then hearing some amazing stories. We talked a little bit about Latasha at Phoenix Raceway. Latasha was somebody, I think, again, if you asked her 4 years ago if she'd be working in racing, she would be like, where? And now, she was one of the first people I met when I moved to Phoenix. And she became really intrigued by what we were doing in NASCAR. And when I was moving to Chicago, she was my phone call and was like, hey, I want you to think about the role at Phoenix Raceway. And so it's fun to see, to me, that's important to me. I want to make sure I am paying it back and paying it forward, because somebody did that for me.
No, I think it's so important too. And I think, it's easy to, and I was saying to my team last night, sometimes women get tagged with this, we're emotional, it's no one gets along, and it's this whole thing. That is true. But what is also true is that you can champion for other women. There's enough room for everybody, but you also have to be willing to let someone champion for you, right? You can't be afraid of someone else saying you're good at something, or you can do this, or do you want to do this? And I think, one of the things I've seen NASCAR do, and I think you're completely instrumental in, is the diversity and inclusion shift that is happening in NASCAR as far as reaching a different consumer base. Because for me, when I go to NASCAR, there's what's your target demographic, Julie? What is NASCAR's target demographic? What is the age range for that?
I'd say, 20, traditionally it's been 25 to 54. I think it's 18 to 34. It's that sweet spot that everybody wants right now.
Right. Well, and I think that's what's interesting is you get younger. And I think that's what everything's getting younger. So with social media and digital and footprints and things like that, where it's like, okay, we can reach them younger, but how do you have them have a positive experience so that they come back? Because it's not about coming once, it's about coming back twice and 3 times and following along. And especially, you know, it's funny because a lot of people follow teams based upon where they live. And I do not feel like that is true for NASCAR, which is different in sports, right? You live in LA, you love the Lakers, right? You just by default, you love the Lakers. But when it's NASCAR, you love a driver, right? And they drive in a bunch of different cities. So it's not necessarily tied to where you live. How have you guys navigated that as you've tried to grow the industry and make different outreach with diversity and inclusion?
So it's a great question, and something is it continues to be a priority for us. And I think if you look at what we're doing in Chicago, so last year for our street race, 85% of our attendees were at their very first NASCAR race. And so that's what this is about. It's about introducing them to the sport. And I've spent some time with those first time fans since the race. Just I want to hear about their experience. What did they enjoy? Why did they decide that they wanted to go to the race? And then, so now it's about the education and helping them understand the sport. Because I think that's, again, if you don't very different from other sports like basketball or baseball, you don't grow up NASCARing, you're not in your backyard behind a steering wheel.
Yeah, you're not in your backyard and you're
it's not something that you just pick up a ball and do. And so that's something that has been really fun for me in talking to all these first time fans, is just hearing the questions that they have. And, why does this happen, or how does this happen? And so for us, that's really what we've been doing in Chicago, is just how do we start from square one on what the sport is. And then we have so many amazing stories to tell. You talk from a diversity and inclusion perspective, you look at our pit crews, I think are in a story that just we can't tell enough about. They are college athletes. We have an Olympic swimmer on one of our teams. They play football, they play basketball. They are now going over the wall, changing 4 tires and refueling the car in under 10 seconds. I mean, the stories on pit road are absolutely amazing. And it's been fun. If anyone that watches the broadcasts lately, Fox right now on Sundays leading in or during the NASCAR Cup Series race, they do a profile on the pit crews, and they have them introduce themselves, very similar to when you watch the NFL and they have the offense introduce themselves and tell their schools. You have the pit crews that talk about, and this, again, these things are they're amazing. They played football in the NFL. They played at Division I NCAA football, and the stories are amazing. And so I think those are things that are unexpected, that when you show people and talk to people about, it's fun to see. And there's just so many of those.
What would you say for you, Jolie? You're obviously a woman in a male-dominated industry, right? Very heavily, and it's changing, it's growing. But how do you overcome, or have you ever had to overcome the stigma of, you said you traded in your marketing hat for, a hard hat? Do you ever have a couple heads bumped of oh, she's here. It's your shit, not just you're here because. Have you ever had those moments and you've had to kind of remind people that you can actually know what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all come across that on occasion. I think, again, for me, I experienced that more when I did join the construction world, just because, again, that was so different. And I was in way over my head. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't I'm all of a sudden now having to learn how to read construction drawings, and I'll never forget the very first meeting I was in with the architects and the general contractor along with our team. There were so many acronyms being thrown out that I was I don't know what any of this is. And I left that meeting my head was spinning, and I'm just what have I got myself into? This is crazy. But those are things that I they're motivation for me. I'm I don't want to be the person in the room that knows the least. I want to be able to have the conversation and contribute. And so after that first meeting, the next meeting, I sat there and literally just wrote down all the acronyms as they were talking, and spent a lot of time with Google, and took a few online courses on how to read construction drawings. So then the next time a meeting happened, I can just begin to contribute. And I think, I'm not afraid to do the hard work. And that's what again, goes back to my roots on the dairy farm, and I'll put that time in. And, sometimes it takes a little bit longer than maybe it should. But I feel like, I'm not afraid to prove myself. And, I think for me in the NASCAR space, I really didn't ever feel that. I don't ever feel like I'm in that situation. I'm sure there's been situations like that where I just chalked it up to, I just got to work harder. But the construction space was the first time where I was just like, okay, game on.
That's incredible too, because I feel like a lot of people would see that task and then be like, I can't do it, or kind of give up, or just like not put in that extra work. And that just like shows how hardworking you are and like how passionate you are about what you do. And yeah, that's incredible. So I love that.
How did you lead a team though? Like, right, like you're learning and you're having to lead a team from a place of knowledge. I think there's something really special about a leader that can say, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, and then make sure the next one knows. I think it comes up with a lot of our guests, right? Of like, women have to be over prepared. You have to be, somebody said, I don't remember who said it, but I'm going to be like, every day is a pop quiz. It's coming. So like, just be ready for it. Because I think sometimes there's opportunities for people to try and expose you of what you don't know, right? And instead of taking it as like a challenge, it's just like, I'm actually supposed to be here. And you're not meant to know everything. Like, I'm so tired of everyone being like, you should know this. It's like, well, at one point you didn't know this. So like, let's be real about it. How do you see sports continuing to evolve, specifically in NASCAR, when it comes to, we talked about diversity and inclusion from a fan, right? But diversity and inclusion from within NASCAR. I mean, NASCAR's old roots. It's especially in the NBA, we have the old hats and the new hats is what we call them. We have, the guys that have been doing in the NBA for 20, 30 years to guys that are just up and coming, and the shift that's changing. And sometimes that doesn't always work nicely in a room of people wanting to change and evolve. How do you manage that from a leadership position, and what tools do you have to be able to do that?
I think for me, the way I've always approached any of those situations, and no matter what the topic is, like, how would I want to be treated in those spaces? And I feel like if I can walk away from a meeting or a conversation or just whatever happened that day, feeling good about how I handled it, that's what I can control. And that's something that I talk to our team about a lot, is just worry about the things that you can control and control the things that you worry about. And so like, I can control how I react to things. And I think then that's, being a leader in that way, just by example, and showing people how to, like, if you are met with adversity, well, here's how Julie handled it. And, again, I always I remind myself I'm representing a lot of people in the NASCAR industry. And so I want to make sure I do right by them. But I think the other side of it is just continuing to push ourselves. And when there is opportunity to lift someone up or, put a spotlight on an area that needs some additional focus, like, here's something we need to be doing. Let's work through it. Like, the great thing about our leadership team is they love those conversations, and they are open to those conversations. And so I think it always, for me, when you look at what's happening with NASCAR, it starts with our leadership team and with the France family and Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell. And I think, they want to have those conversations. They want to know where they can lean in and support as well. And that's been helpful for me just in Chicago, again, because we're new in Chicago. Like, again, talking about the education side of NASCAR, and we've had to really start from scratch to build that up. And the leadership team's been incredibly supportive, just helping us work through that.
It's crazy. I have a really fun question I want to know the answer to. So I've seen sometimes there's disagreements is a good word between drivers on the track, right? Like, sometimes they throw down, sometimes there's words given, and everyone's very possessive, right? It is a competition. At the end of the day, It is a competition. So how do you, like, when that happens, do you have to call someone and say, okay, that's not acceptable behavior? do you have that? You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that get managed? Because in our world, right, there's GMs, there's owners, there's presidents, there's people that have to have these conversations with athletes of like, this is not how we want to be represented, or it's unbecoming behavior. Do you have that in NASCAR? I mean, you're at the top, so somebody's got to call you and say, Julie, handle this. Or are you like,
I don't. So that's one thing. Again, I am focused on the Chicago street race. And so things like from a league perspective, like that's really managed by the NASCAR leadership team. And then I'd also say like when you have those disagreements from a driver perspective, I'm sure there are conversations that happen with their teams and their team owners and probably with their sponsors. I have not been in the room for those conversations. I'm good with that. I'm just going to continue to focus on selling tickets. And, you know, I think a little controversy is never a bad thing either. So like, you know, there's always that balance, like, and, you know, managing it. But thankfully, I've not had to have those conversations.
That's wild. That's wild. How much do you interface with the city? You talked a lot about when you moved there, you had it, like, are you in the office, you know, are you meeting with governors, Senate leaders? Like, are you leading with governmental organizations within the city? And if so, how did you prepare for that with it being so intricately designed within the city of Chicago that oftentimes has a lot of unrest and unsettlement within, you know, the city and the suburbs of Chicago sometimes?
So I do. The city of Chicago is essentially a partner with us on this event, and in conjunction with the Chicago Sports Commission and the Chicago Park District. So we do work hand in hand with the team at the city of Chicago, and that's across all city agencies. So we have, I don't know how many planning meetings and just prep meetings leading into the weekend, and then coming out of it, just again, what works, where can we improve, how do we get better? So, you know, we've got just a number of conversations. There's probably not a day that goes by where I don't have multiple conversations with someone affiliated with any of those entities I just mentioned. And I think the thing that, again, the city's been incredibly wonderful to work with. And this is a city that knows how to put on big events. And that's the thing that I picked up on in my very first meeting with the city agencies is, you know, whether it's big festivals or the marathon or the air and water show. I mean, there are so many events that this group hosts and put on every day that, you know, what we were doing definitely is different. But there's a model in place that, and some really amazing people in place that really helped us navigate and learn and just helped us understand where we plug in with what they're already doing and what does that look like. So, you know, from a preparation perspective, my role in Phoenix definitely was helpful in that, just because, again, leading a track property in a city, like having those conversations with the city leadership and city council. And I think really just the difference is just the scale and what I'm doing here in Phoenix with, you know, whether it's the mayor's office or just all the city agencies, city council, it's just the scale's a little different. But at the end of the day, you know, what we're doing is in partnership with them, and they've been great advocates for us.
That's really cool. I feel like too, like you've done so much in your career and where you are today. What are you most proud of, or what's like your biggest accomplishment in your career?
I mean, it's hard to top, you know, this very first street race in NASCAR history. And that's something that again, that first year for us, the unknowns, and there's obviously a lot of stress, and you just want to do right by our industry and right by the city. And, but I think you look back, like what we were doing truly was we were making history. And I wanted the team, as we were leading into it, just despite all the long hours and just conversations and things that went into getting that event done, like we were truly part of something that had never been done before. And that's incredibly special. And, you know, it's humbling to think about. Like I have goosebumps just like the fact that I had a role in that, and that the team here pulled that off, and it was as amazing as it was, even with the rain that we had. It's special. So it's hard for me to top that, honestly. It's pretty awesome.
What are the 3 biggest skill sets somebody that wants to be in your shoes needs to have?
Hard work, not being afraid of doing the work. Patience, I have learned patience. Patience is not my best event, but patience is incredibly important. And I think, like, especially with Chicago and what we're doing, it's hard. I'm going to give you four: being innovative and like pushing yourself to think outside the box, but also being a really good listener, because the city, again, they know how to put on big events. And, you know, for us to be successful, we needed to listen to whether it was the city agencies who have planned these events or the residents around the footprint, to the businesses that we were working with. Being a good listener and taking that information is incredibly important to apply to the event.
It's wild because I feel, and we say all the time too, right? Like the skill set you learn in college, a lot of what you have in order to advance or grow, you have to be willing to learn later in life. Like you don't come to the job with all the tools. You have to be willing to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn, instead of, well, I only know how to do X and that's all I'm going to do. And I think as something, an event like this that you're building and creating right in Chicago, you have to be willing to say, we've never done this before. So there's no standard for it. There's no book. There's no list of things. It kind of, the list probably fluxes here and there. What would you say is one of the biggest opportunities for you as you transition through your career that you took that you might not have been ready for?
You know, I'd say, like, for me, taking on more of the operations and trying to learn that side of the business, at the time, it was just curiosity and just something that I had an interest in. I had no idea that it would lead me to where I am today. And, you know, whether it was the construction space, which was truly due to my intrigue on the ops side, and then to what we're doing here in Chicago, like having that general knowledge of the operations side of the business was incredibly important for me. And again, very unexpected. I was not like, I never, again, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, well, someone asked me when I left Daytona to go work for the construction team if I wanted to be a track president. Actually, our HR department did. And I said, no, no, I'm good. And that was in 2016. And 2 years later, I was named the president of Phoenix Raceway, and I raised my hand then. So it's just fun to see you talk about learning about yourself. That was like those 2 years with the construction team, I learned more about myself than I have the rest of my career.
Yeah. It's wild. Sometimes it's not why me, it's why not me. And exactly. You have to be okay. And like, it's weird because I do feel like as women, we talk about this, you're afraid to say me, I can do this, raise your hand. Because you're like, am I looking like I'm trying too hard? Am I trying to impress someone? Are they going to think I'm not qualified? But that's their judgments and their assessment. You have to just walk with confidence and know that, you know, what's for you is for you. And if it's meant to be, it will be. But oftentimes the opportunity is there for you to take, not for you to wait. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you don't take those, because what's the worst thing that happens? You're like, okay, didn't do a good job. Don't know what I'm doing. This isn't for me. You're still gaining something from that. Mm-hmm. If you're just constantly scared and afraid to raise your hand, lean in, or step up, you're not going to progress. And I think that's one thing that you've shown us on the show today is like, you have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And it's not an easy thing to do, Julie. Like it is not, it's so scary. And you're like, oh, I don't know. But once you do it once and you come out the other side, you're like, yeah, okay, next. You know what I mean? You're like, and I did that. What do you want to see for the sport of NASCAR as we bring this to a close? What do you want to see the sport of NASCAR do in the next 10 years?
I just want to see the momentum continue. I mean, we've got so much momentum right now, and there's just a lot of energy and interest around our sport, and I think we're doing it the right way. And, you know, again, thinking about 85% of new fans at our race, we had a Netflix series come out this year, which has led to even more new fans. So it's a proud, like I've always been proud to be part of NASCAR. I'm very proud to this day to be part of this sport. And I think for me, just continuing to push ourselves, be bold and innovative. That's something that our leadership team tells us every day. And that's fun for me because like, at every point, it should never be, well, this is what we've always done. It's like, what else can we do? And push ourselves to be creative. And that, you know, I think sometimes you talk about being afraid to try things new or step outside the comfort zone. Like you have, the great thing at NASCAR, you have leadership that's pushing you to do that and they want you to do that. And sometimes it may not work. Like we know that's not, you're not going to hit every one idea, like, but if you don't try it, how do you know?
Yeah, so true. That's so true. Well, Megan and I feel like we're going to go on a NASCAR tour because that's what we're doing now is just go on a little NASCAR tour and see it from all the different perspectives. Although I do not think Megan and I would succeed at the jumping over the wall and doing all of that. I feel like
Me either. Don't worry.
that would be a show in itself of just the level of work that would take. I don't know how we'd have to train for that, Megan. Like I think we might have to like train, to be honest.
We're competing with Olympic swimmers, NFL players. I'm good.
I'm good.
And we're like, I had to ask them, like, there's a method to how they get over the wall, Megan. Mm-hmm. Like, there's like it's not just like I'm here and it's my right foot, sometimes my left foot, sometimes it's just mechanically in their brain how to get over the wall. And I had to cross it when I was there, and I was like, do I go this way or do I want to go that way? Or like, I was like in my head because I didn't want to fall and embarrass myself. And I'm like, these guys do it with a car coming 100 miles an hour out of them. Yeah, like no fear. Like what scares those people? That's what I want to know. What is the pit crew scared of? Because a lot of what I'm scared of goes on right in there.
Right.
That's a very good question.
Like
I don't think a lot.
It's probably like a grasshopper. It's something like so simple. And we're thinking it's this big thing. And they're like, I just don't like ladybugs. And you're like, what? You do all this, but it's something so simple. Mm-hmm. It's so crazy. Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna have to come to Phoenix. We want to go to the Vegas Raceway. I feel like Megan, we're just gonna take. We need to get a little motorhome, a little tour bus for her table, and we're just gonna road trip it. It's the road trip with her table.
Yes,
I love it.
I think that'd be awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I loved, you just being able to share your story and your passion, because there are so many amazing stories in NASCAR, and yours is one of those. There's just a testament to like true grit, hard work, but also just being really confident in yourself to be able to tackle anything. And I thank you, because we need more people like you at the top, because I look up to you. So I want to make sure that you know that, because I'm going to challenge myself today for you, Julie.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Awesome. Okay, we're coming to Chicago, so get ready for us.
Love it.
Megan, that was so amazing. I mean, honestly, Julie is so inspiring to me. She started entry level in NASCAR. She actually came from the dairy farm, but for her to be able to tie growing up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin into her hard work and dedication now as to kind of what built her and that solid foundation of how hard she wants to work for things, it's a true testament of God's plan and what he has for you and why he's giving you tools or challenges, because you might need them later in life.
Right. No, I love the fact that she kept all of her rejection letters that she received from people that now she's working with in her college. I'm like, that is so cool. Like, just to look back at where you started to where you are now. And she mentioned she started like in PR, and now she's running. She went to Daytona. She went to the Phoenix Open and was running that, the present there. And now she's doing Chicago street racing. Like, that is incredible. What a great accomplishment, and like such a great leader for like somebody like me, somebody like you to look up to as well.
Yeah. I wish she like kept the letters. I would frame them. I would totally frame them. So when those people that rejected me had to come meet with me in Chicago for that street race, they'd come into my office and see them framed on the wall and be like, remember? I don't even say anything. It's just there. You can read your letter. It's fine. Welcome to my office. Maybe that's too much. But no, she honestly, it's funny too, listening to the care and concern that she has as she's building this in Chicago, right? It's never been done before. And making sure that whether it's with city officials, the residents, the racers, the drivers, just the community, and how she's able to bring an experience with NASCAR to someone that might not have had that experience, but learning the ins and the outs of it. It's unlikely that you get someone in a leadership position that cares so much about the details and the experience for the people it's impacting. Not the racers, not the drivers, not the team, not the company, but the community and the citizens it's impacting. And it's an opportunity for them to get to experience a sport that Chicago probably had never experienced before.
Yeah. And I love, like she mentioned too, like being in Chicago, where it's like they're bringing so much revenue there. People are seeing the city of Chicago. But the first thing I thought of when she was telling me about this race is like, well, what about the sound? And so it's so interesting she touched on that too, like where they put mufflers on the cars to make sure that the citizens of Chicago were like comfortable in like their living spaces.
Yeah, it's very rare you get somebody in a leadership position that is up at the top but worried about the little tiny details at the bottom. But her just resilience and drive. You know, every challenge that's put in front of her, whether it's, you know, putting on the hard hat and building a new raceway and learning that. I loved that she's like, I was just taking notes and writing down the construction slang, and then I would go Google it so I was educated next time when they were talking and I could understand. And her ability to kind of adapt and grow and challenge herself throughout her career is it's special. It takes a special person to do that. So she owes us a ride on the track in Chicago. I can't wait to do that. And we're going to go find Latasha, because Latasha is going to be up next. She passed the baton to another woman at Phoenix Raceway, which is just, that is a hero. Again, fabulous hero. Well done. Because she wants to see more women in places of leadership, power, and diversity and inclusion. So Latasha at the Phoenix Raceway, you're up next on Her Table. But thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you guys next week. Make sure you like, subscribe, and let us know who you want to see next. We'll see you guys soon.